What's up, guys? Thought I'd make another quick video for some content. I recently saw Ben Rittner. I forget his dog name. Lonely Dog, I think. Stick fighting guy, Dog Brothers. He put out a couple of videos where he was breaking down styles of fighters into 4 groups. He used earth, air, fire, water, I think, which is really cool. Probably about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little more, I came up with a similar system. Mine uses 3. Mine's basically paper, rock, scissors, because they do kind of play together, and the goal was to be all 3. And this doesn't just apply to stick fighting, this applies to striking as well. It even applies to grappling a little bit, in that different styles happen. But basically I broke it into 3, and they do kind of play off of each other. Again, when I developed it, I kept in mind that you want to be the best that you can be at all 3, but you're going to have natural tendencies towards certain things. Anybody who ever kickboxes me knows I'm a runner. I will do everything but turn around and run away from you to make space. As soon as you take my kicks away, I turn into you make me be a boxer. I'm doing my best to get right up next to you. So I have a completely different style when the rules change. So having said that, the 3 things I came up with were crasher, dasher, and basher. I know I've taught this to a few people. It takes a little bit of knowledge in a couple different areas to really make sense of a lot of this, but the basics are pretty simple. We have what we call, let's start with dasher. Dashers are the folks that stay right outside of the bubble. They are very good at reading range. They are very good at in-out. They are real good at getting in, getting out, getting in and cutting angles, being able to strike from a distance and then evade. They're not the kind of people who are going to wade into stuff. They're going to use movement, they're going to use timing, and they're, like I said, they're the guys who bounce around a lot. When you talk about sticks and stick fighting, this becomes very, very prominent, because a lot of people tend to get themselves right out of striking range. If you got kicks and punches, your ranges are pretty close together. Like Denzel said the other day, your kick range is about half a step back from your jab range. Depends on your stance, things like that. Everybody's a little different, but I'm down with saying exactly that. You start adding a weapon, especially something that's 26 to 33 inches, whatever it is, piece of rebar, a stick, machete, whatever it is, that bubble extends by quite a bit. So my kick range and my stick range is way higher than my kick range. So when you've got a dasher, you've got that guy who is playing off the bubble, right? The bubble's pretty long with a stick. With your hands, it's about arm's length and maybe a touch more, right? So when I have people drilling, I always have them either touch the ends of the sticks together and be like, right here is where you are in a fight bubble. We touch each other, fingertips together, you're in hand range, you're in the fight bubble. All it takes is a little shift forward and you've crashed through their bubble, okay? So what a dasher does is a dasher reads that bubble and does their best to stay out of it until they're ready to move in, and usually counter. What they're usually going to do is draw you in, okay? Jeet Kune Do principle, attack by drawing, right? I'm using that half beat, that timing, to get someone to take some forward action at me. We're at the bubble, I'm pretending like I don't want to fight you. I'm making you come to me because I'm dancing around, I'm dashing around, and what I'm going to do is as soon as you close, I'm going to use angles, I'm going to use backwards movement to get you, to suck you in, to get you to come forward, and then I'm going to cut that off halfway with a half beat, quarter beats, whatever. You're using their attack to your advantage. You're using their movement to your advantage, right? Because generally dashers are bouncy, agile fighters. They're not power fighters usually. They're the types that are they move in, they move in, they move out, they pivot, they evade, they use kind of unorthodox footwork a lot of times, okay? So you got your dasher. Dasher reads the bubble, plays evasive, comes in, gets out, comes in, drives through, okay? So they don't want to sit there and exchange. They want to get their hits in and move out, okay? Dasher, okay? So crasher, they're kind of the halfway in between, all right? And then basher is pretty much the opposite of dasher, okay? Bashers are the ones that have very grounded movement. They fight from inside the bubble. They want to get inside your bubble, right? And they want to stay there, right? So bashers are the types that are going to read the bubble and continually close it. Usually they're pressure fighters, right? They're the guys who want to come in, they want to slug, they're not afraid to take damage. And if they are afraid to take damage, usually they've got a pretty good set of skills with head movement, block, pivoting, things like that. So, but they're heavier hitters. They're usually bigger guys. They're not as agile, and they can close bubbles and keep it closed, right? So, with a basher, you get someone who can read the bubble, apply pressure, and cut you off, right? They want to stay in that range. They are absolutely happy to be doing a game of head movement and combinations, right? If we're just talking about boxing, they're the guys who are going to be right up in your face, bumping to get, not even barely looking at you, touching you with their elbows so they know where to hit, like, oh, I can hit him, bang, those guys, right? They're the ones that are going to be having a lot of movement from the inside and a lot of angles and pivots, but the angles and pivots aren't to break out of the bubble, they are to get superior angles and beat the trash out of you, okay? So bashers tend to come in and plant, okay? Whereas a dasher is the kind that's going to bounce in, bounce out. They're going to be temporarily in one place, and they're going to drive through you, they're going to drive around you, or they're going to back out, right? The basher is the kind of guy that's going to move in, plant, and slug, right? So with with that, you've got a lot more. It's a lot less dynamic movement. A little slower, a little heavier, a little more lumbering. I don't want to say lumbering because I don't want it to sound like it's a bad thing. But it is a lot more, stable. It's a lot more base. Okay. Someone who's got a good base can take a good shot, right? If they're able to compact and drive down into the ground when you hit them, that drives that force down into the ground and less whipping back in their noggin. Okay. So, cover, shell, and shield. Those guys are going to have a good skill set for cover, shell, and shield. All right. So that's your bashers. All right. Crashers. All right. That's kind of halfway in between. These are the guys who play outside the bubble and using timing and distance and being able to read movement and reaction. Those are the guys that are going to get in and stay in. Now, the difference is what a crasher does compared to a basher. Once they get in, dasher's going to come in, dasher's going to bounce out, bounce through, or, get away, right? They've closed the bubble, they want to open the bubble back up because they don't want to be in a protracted fight inside the bubble, okay? What I always refer to as being in the blender. You don't want to be in the blender for very long if you're a dasher, right? When the basher gets in, the basher plants and the basher smashes, okay? What the crasher does is the crasher gets into the bubble and then generally is going to establish a clinch, or is going to be the type of fighter who is going to be evasive from within the bubble. Okay, they're not planting. Okay, this is where the basher and the crasher are different. The crasher is going to use movement inside the bubble, right? The basher not going to use a lot of actual footwork and movement from inside the bubble, right? The crasher has crashed in, the crasher wants to stay in, but they absolutely have the option to come out. Like I said, the crasher is generally the best of both worlds kind of guy, right? They don't generally fight from the outside. They use outside attacks to actually draw, kind of like the dasher, but the dasher gets in and goes out. The crasher gets in and stays, but uses that same kind of movement from within the bubble that the dasher would use outside the bubble. Compared to the basher, again, your crasher is not planting and slugging and using headwork and movement and shielding in the same way, right? It's all similar, but the difference being is they're using different footwork. They're not using traditional footwork as much. They're not using the same kind of pivots. They're cutting angles from within the movements and from within the bubbles to get to where they need to be. Okay, so generally, like I said, that ends in a clinch. A basher is not necessarily a clinch fighter. A crasher is probably naturally a clinch fighter. Okay, so you can see how these three things play together and how you want to be all three, right? You want to be able to do all these things. You want to be able to move outside the bubble like a dasher. You want to be able to cut in, bounce out, or cut through like a dasher. You want to be able to crash in and establish a clinch, a dominant clinch, or be able to move from within the bubble to keep a superior angle. Okay? That's your crasher, right? You want to be able to do all those things. Basher, you want to be able to plant and do heavy damage if you need to, right? So again, you want to harness all three of these elements, right? Crasher, dasher, basher. In general, like I said, it's kind of like paper, rock, scissors. Bashers don't do very well against, bashers don't do very well against dashers because of the speed and agility difference. The dasher's main goal is to keep that bubble. Close the bubble, open it right back up, right? The basher's goal is to get to that bubble and trap that person into their close range fight. So bashers don't do very well against dashers, okay? Just for that reason. So there's your rock and your scissors, okay? Crashers don't tend to do very well against bashers because they're actually getting in to play the inside game and they're using it like a dasher, but now all of a sudden they're playing the basher's game. So your crashers, even establishing a clinch, you're playing the basher's game. Okay, you've crashed in, good job. Are you sure that's what you wanted to do? So like I said, if you're a crasher, you need to play the best of both worlds. You need to be able to know when you can go in and establish and stay in the bubble safely, or when it's time to get out, right? So, and then dashers are kind of weak against crashers because that's the pressure, right? A crasher and a dasher tend to be agile, okay? So they're both playing generally the same game. The difference is one wants to get in and stay in, one wants to get in and get out. Once they're in, the crasher generally is tying them up or doing something to cut the angles to keep the dasher from exiting the bubble, okay? So as you can see, it's kind of paper, rock, scissors, all right? Let me see. So yes, bashers do well against crashers because The Crasher just went in to play the Basher's game. Dashers do well against Bashers because they're faster and the point is to get in and get out. They're not going to stay in the bubble. Okay? Crashers do well against Dashers because they're playing the Dasher's game but switching it to a Basher's game to kind of control the elements of what's happening. Okay? So, let me think real fast how to say that the right way. Basher beats Crasher. Crasher beats Dasher. Dasher beats Basher. Play paper, rock, scissors with that. All right? But again, it's not that you want to hyper-focus on being one thing or the other. You want to focus on being good at all these things. These are elements. They're not specific styles and ways of being. All right? You're going to have a natural tendency towards certain things. My natural tendencies have always been towards dash and crash. Okay? I'm not a big guy. I'm not a power guy. I hit like a kitten. So I'm not a basher by nature, right? But I've tried to work on that a little bit more, right? So everyone's going to have their elements, and everyone's going to have the things that they naturally take to more than others, right? So having said all that, rambled through that, I just wanted to get that on film. Thanks again for Lonely Dog for inspiring me to put this on video. Yeah, I'll see you guys again soon.